Then we come to a case of the stability. So where is it about the usage or the priority? So I've always been emphasizing that priority should be given priority. But sometimes there are cases where the usage, that means is used ever so frequently that we might actually have to give way to usage rather than priority. So this is where the article of 23.2 comes with purpose. In accordance with the objects of the code, the principle of priority is to be used to promote stability and is not intended to be used to upset a long accepted name in its custom meaning by the introduction of a name that is senior pseudonym or homonym. So what you're trying to say is, okay, I've given you 2 case studies where it's always about the date that has to come priority. But sometimes when it comes to usage, now it's regarding to the stability here. Because if something has been used so frequently and it's a global thing, and if you just want to change in regards to priority, can you imagine? Maybe for researchers it's easier to adapt, but sometimes it's so much more trickier if you want to deal with, say, a long established name for crustacean or fish, etc. If you want to deal with fishermen and go like, hey, you know what? Because of the principle of priority, we have to change it to this name. It's going to make it a bit more complex. So we want to form some form of stability, and that's where usage comes in the way. Okay, so let's give an example here of usage versus priority. So we have the case of the Glyptodon by Owen in 1838 and Megatherium of Cuvier 1796. So the saga of how this nearly lost name to one of these were in 2005. Okay, so buckle up and hear me out. So Weiss in 1830 found fossils where he assigned to Megatherium Cuvier 1796. Later, Geoffrey Saint Hilaire in 1833 came in the scene and decided that the fossil that they found was not Megatherium, but the established name should have been Lepitherium for these remains. D. Elton in 1834 also was in agreement and recognized that they do not belong anything to Megatherium. Okay, so you've got 2 people that were looking at fossils and go like, hey, okay, this is really not Megatherium. So then you have, okay, while this is ongoing, we have another ongoing study with the Glyptodon. So Glyptodon was getting off to a rough start. Okay, why? So Owen in Parrish, so when you mean by Owen in Parrish, meaning to say Owen, work found in the works of Parrish in 1838. Now he gave the name Glyptodon to a genus primarily based on an isolated indeterminable tooth. So before they could find this, these guys actually just found a tooth. Then what happened was, as the tooth has been lost, this name is generally considered as nomen dubium. Okay, dubium, in other words, is dubious, is in doubt. You're doubting because how in the world are you going to determine a specimen based on just a little tooth? So it's impossible to determine whether a specimen belongs to that group or not, obviously. In fact, this tooth probably belonged to what is currently known as Penarcthosis by Brewmister 1868, and not even Glyptodon. Can you imagine? So one drama here, and at the same time one drama is going on here because of a tooth. So Owen in 1838, he established the name Glyptodon clavipes for a tooth and part of a skeleton of an impressive fossil later that was found in Argentina. Okay, so now, okay, good. So hooray, this is fossil found, Argentina. They are now getting widely recognized. So now coming to the name problem. The name Lepitherium. Remember this guy? Geoffrey Saint Hilaire here, this guy. Okay, coming back. That's why there's a reason why I highlighted this in color, so you can sort of trace back a bit. Okay, so the name Lepitherium, Geoffrey Saint Hilaire 1833, is the earliest available name for now what is recognized as Glyptodon. So he decided to name this as Lepitherium, but not realizing that now the Lepitherium that he was in reference to is recognized as the Glyptodon. So now stability would be threatened if the priority of Lepitherium of Geoffrey St. Hilaire is maintained over Glyptodon. Okay, so by right, meaning to say, the Lepitherium that Geoffrey was talking about is in reference to this actually. But now the thing is, because this name was getting reputation, so now it's gonna interfere with the stability, and this one will be threatened if the priority of Lepitherium is maintained over the Glyptodon. So now, in order to conserve the Glyptodon, it is proposed that the names Glyptodon Owen perish and Lepitherium be suppressed. Now, totally suppressed it all. But funnily enough, I don't have the continuation of this. So, with the article on purpose, in accordance with the objects of the code, the principle of variety is to be used to promote stability and is not intended to be used to upset a long accepted name. And it's a custom meaning by the introduction of a name that it is senior, synonym, or homonym. So example, in this case, Lepitherium of Geoffrey is suppressed. So we have to suppress the name so that Glyptodon can continue to be used. So in order to not interfere with this name, only Lepitherium is suppressed and they conserve the name Glyptodon. Alright? So this is one case study. Now we come to something that probably we are more familiar with marine related stuff or aquatic, okay? Sorry. So now this is coming to the case study of the giant prawn. Again, buckle up your seat. Try to trace back, try to keep into mind the names here. Okay, so now we are in reference to the giant river prawn, Macrobrachium rosenbergi, by de Man in 1879. Okay, so we'll talk a bit about the economic value. It's one of the most commercially important crustaceans in the world. So being a commercially important species, obviously then you're going to look into something that is more global. The name is going to be frequently used by not just taxonomists, but of course those who work very closely with aquaculture of the species. So it's widely fished in South and Southeast Asia and is extensively cultured in Asia, America, and Africa. The overall production of this is 205,000 over tons with a net value of 896 million plus. So in the last decade, an average Macrobrachium rosenbergi production rose by about 35% in quantity and almost 20% in its value. Okay, so now having known of its value, here we're going to explain another form of usage versus priority aspect. So Macrobrachium rosenbergi in de Man 1879 was first recorded in Southeast Asia by Rumphius in 1705. Okay, and before Linnaeus Systema in 1758, because it's 1705, this does not provide nomenclature priority. So perhaps Rumphius would have actually recorded this, but because regarding with the ICZN code, anything that is from 1758 onwards is recognized. So sadly, 1705 is not, and that's how de Man got it in 1879. Then coming to this, Macrobrachium rosenbergi in de Man 1879, so now it was described as Paleomon carcinus, a variation of rosenbergi. So a variation is somewhat like treating it also like a subspecies, okay? From Andai in New Guinea, which is considered now as Papua in Indonesia. And it was described on the basis of a single female. So it is believed that to be the only variety nowadays, as I said, nowadays is known as a subspecies of P. carcinus linnaeus in 1758, which is an American species that they are referring to. Okay, then we have Cowles, I hope I pronounced his name correctly, in 1914, he noted that there were two distinct forms in the Indian and the Philippine material, but continued to use carcinus for both. Okay, so here, again, yeah, we have this from this name now, from Macrobium rosenbergii, is come to this stage of Palaeomon carcinus, but a variation of rosenbergii. And then we're also dealing with P. carcinus specifically, but in reference to an American species. Cowles was also, of course, in reference to P. carcinus, but he noticed those in Indian and the Philippines, anything related to Indian, which is all the ones in red, and the ones the Philippines, and all those that look like the Philippines, there was a bit of a distinct difference, but he couldn't quite make enough comparisons. So for now, he just used both for similar names as P. carcinus. Then we have Sanya in 1925 who came into the scene. Now he showed that P. carcinus is a species of America only. So it's not in reference to the two different kinds. So now Sanya proposed that Palaeomon daquati. So now, because this is in reference to American species only, so he can afford to name it as a new species in a way. So he proposed Palaeomon daquati Sanya in 1925 for the specimens from the Indo-West Pacific. Okay, so anything from the Indo-West Pacific, all those that are in red as I highlighted, from all of this region, he used the Java one as the type locality. So all of these ones, he used this type, his name bearing type from Java specifically. Okay. And then in reference, so daquati, he found it to be, from the Indo-Pacific region. And he has established again, so the fact that instead of having a variant for rosenbergii, he elevated the name or raised the name again to rosenbergii, so in giving of recognition for those of the Philippines. So with that of the Philippines, he decided to use this region from New Guinea as the type locality. All right, so bear in mind. So now please follow me with terms of the scenario. Initially, what was taught as P. macrobrachium now has gone back to the name of macrobrachium again, yeah? Macrobrachium with two different species. One is daquati, this of the locality, and now M. rosenbergii with this as the locality. Now, coming to the big problem. The species of prawn that is predominantly fish, okay, the one that we're talking about in terms of ecological importance, yada yada, cultured and studied by the biologists, is the one to the west of Huxley line. So the west of Huxley's line is the red one. And where is west? It's west here. So the west of Huxley line, and is defined as a specimen, the lectotype of Macrobrachium daquati. But it's universally known as Macrobrachium rosenbergii. Ha ha ha. So again, remember how from the earlier name we kept using rosenbergii. So the ones that the Southeast Asians one, etc., were doing and all, etc., that's actually in reference to daquati. But now globally, everyone has been calling it rosenbergii. I mean, because yes, there was variations of it, yada yada. At one point, it was used as rosenbergii. So now the thing is, it has, since at this time, everybody has technically in 1879, whether or not it was a variation or not, everybody was recognizing it as rosenbergii. So instead of recognizing this as rosenbergii, it was actually this. So now we have a problem here. So what is the proposal to this? So what was decided was to set aside the holotype for Macrobrachium rosenbergii and to designate a lectotype of Macrobrachium daquati as a neotype of Macrobrachium rosenbergii in its place. So technically, the daquati that Sanya actually initially decided to make for in Java, it cannot be used. So the holotype for that, the daquati, the designated so technically that one cannot be used as a holotype. But now this will be designated to designate this lactotype will be the neotype for Macrobium rosenbergii. You understand what I'm trying to get at? It's because, and why this problem in a way technically occurred was there was no Macrobium rosenbergii, well, although it was established then, it probably was to show that there was no established type from the very beginning. So that is why it now has become complicated as such. So that is why, because we had to recognize the Indo-West Pacific one as rosenbergii, because everybody, in terms of, again, the stability, the usage, it was more frequently used as rosenbergii. So we cannot omit that we have this as a type. So now we have to use this as a neotype in replacement of the name for Macrobium rosenbergii. So now the thing is, if this has now been replaced with rosenbergii, what do you make of the species here? Okay, so if the commission votes for the proposal, the name rosenbergii will be the retained commercially valuable species, but the name Macrobergii will be the taken out of its circulation. So technically, Dakotai will sort of in a way taken out of circulation, but it will be of course in the synonym list. Okay. So and then what will happen is for the species defined as the holotype for rosenbergii, a new name has been proposed, and now this one will act as Macrobium wallacei. Okay, why do you use wallacei? Because technically, if you're looking at this as the Wallace line, it comes from the Wallace, or is towards the east of the Wallace line. So yeah, that's how pretty much the Wawar and Neng came about. If Neng, of course, you're dealing with Peter Neng. So that's how he came about with the name of M. wallacei. Complicated, isn't it? Yes, I understand. It was really complicated from just this rosenbergii and the fact that this is panjang punya cerita. Yes. So it's just to give you an idea about why sometimes people want to change this names a lot. But this is exactly what I wanted to achieve with you, because I think the earlier ones were quite straightforward because it's a priority thing. But this one is more because of a usage. It's the universal term. If one could have a step, so why we have sometimes to use the stability and also the usage is because of how publicly it's known. And it's pretty much in reference also, like with regards to the Aedes mosquito. We've known it so much so from our childhood. But do you know now that they've actually changed the name from Aedes to Stegomyia aegypti? So the species name is still the same, but Aedes mosquitoes now, in regards to the dengue fever, yellow fever and all, this, what we probably a lot of us still regard it as, is now changed to this genus name. Okay, so what happened with this? Yeah, exactly. So there was, I think you can read up about this as to why they decided to change the name. So, but the systematics and the name controversy. So the yellow fever mosquito belonged to the tribe of this and to the genus Aedes and subgenus. But according to recent analysis, some authors raised that the subgenus to the level genus. So obviously now with the advancements of say phylogenetics, molecular work and all, so prior to this it was a subgenus, but now they've raised it up to genus level. So which was traditionally, then of course this was initially traditionally treated as Aedes, but now it has to be related to this. So obviously we have this problem because we have always known it as Aedes, and then it's not just for taxonomies you're dealing with everybody who's probably had encounters with this in terms of the fever, etc. So much so, the Journal of Medical Entomology of Policy and Names of Adenine Mosquito Genera and Subgenera, they have made a statement where so JME takes the position that more research and interpretation are needed to develop this consensus. In particular, nomenclature implications need to be separated from their cladistic analysis. Okay, so what it's saying is, yes, cladistic analysis, the phylogenetics, etc., has come about of the raising of subgenus to genus level, etc. But now there will be, of course, the name implications. So according to this, Jamie encourages authors dealing with the adenine mosquitoes to maintain the uses of the traditional name, except when authors have taxonomic reasons for not doing so. So perhaps for other when you're dealing with other taxonomies, they can actually use the new genus, but when dealing on a public aspect, to not create that confusion, it will best to use the traditional name. So GME also permits authors to adopt the newly proposed classification. So again, of course, they're encouraging it if they are convinced of the case for elevation of particular genus. Authors are asked to include the previous binomial combinations as well. When you're talking about the previous combinations, etc., is of course going into the synonym list and seeing the track record, which is why I very much emphasize that it looks very tedious, but having that track record of the synonym list is really like, yeah, is, as I said, is a track record of history, like how the names have changed over time, and it's really important to have that. And then another case study of nomenclature and biodiversity informatics, a common planktropical coral leaf of Montestria. It is highly, okay, a lot of you really, it's not only about you not having to write the genus and species name properly, but sometimes you disregard how it is spelled. So now I'm going to give you this other case example as to why taxonomists get particularly irritated if you don't spell it properly. So sometimes there are cases where, yeah, in this example, we have Monstrea or Monstrea. Is it, now because of the spelling difference, is it in reference to the same thing? Or now is it a different thing? Do you have one genus or two genera? So according to GBIF, this is the biogeography of Monstrea, spelled with the EE, of their distribution. So it has a very tropical to a bit of subtropical distribution. But then if it's Monstrea, it seems to be very what do you call this, endemic towards this region, okay, the Caribbeans and a little bit, of course, of Brazil. But then on one coral systematics working in the Caribbean, he actually spelled the genus correctly under the IWP coral systematics to spell the genus in, and the ones he spelled the genus correctly, and IWP coral systematics actually spelled it incorrectly. So it's even a spelling mistake now. So sometimes these are the implications. Sometimes we use a lot of this, like say GBIF, as a platform to see whether there are differences. But now it's more of a spelling issue rather than a difference. So you see the implications of you having to spell something wrong. And then it creates further confusion for other people who want to talk about this. So yeah, pretty much that's the end of my talk for today. But, and of course, there's so many kinds of problems out there. But yeah, I just wanted to give you an idea of what taxonomists have to deal with. So it's very straightforward to actually deal with new species, because yeah, it's naming a species and it's always the fun part. But when it comes to doing reviews, it's always very tiring, very tedious because of these things. Having to look into lists and then you go like, it's a spelling mistake. So technically, if it's a spelling mistake, but other authors have been using it, you would actually have to create a synonym list and pool all of these data together so that other people who are reading your work will realize that, okay, this is actually in reference to this. So it's actually, it's in a way why I like taxonomy. It's not just about the ID part. It's a bit of crime scene investigation kind of approach where you have to do a bit of digging up, you have to do some literature work, you have to go like, okay, these people did this wrong, and also you're creating a better platform for other readers to go about it as this is what is now currently accepted. So I now hope, at least through this course, you realize the hard work and effort of sort of the work that taxonomy actually do to really spending time digging up things and doing the work we do. It's fun. It's not particularly easy. It's challenging. It's back to looking literature, looking at the specimens if the specimens are gone. So it's really fun, actually, to be honest. and having to deal with experts in the field. It's especially like in my case, I really look up to Peter Ng, who is like the crustacean expert globally. It's nice to come to that kind of level of recognition. So again, today's the end of my talk. Are there any questions you would like to ask before I end the presentation? Okay, wonderful. So I believe it's very straightforward. I'm not going to give any assignments for this. So yeah, it's just for general knowledge. But of course, it'll definitely come on the exam, more likely like an essay. So yeah, thank you very much, and I appreciate all of your feedback and all of your questions. And I will see you on Thursday. We actually have a special guest speaker for this Thursday, so please be early. And I would like some of you to ask questions as well. The more questions, the better. So thank you very much.